Hi, and welcome to the Business Spotlight Series. My name's Mark McNulty, and I'm president of Action Coach Bluegrass. Today, I have Nick Stover, who is the founder and CEO of Shark Jockey, as my guest. Welcome, Nick.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark. Happy to speak with you today.
Great. So today we're going to be talking to Nick about his business, his journey to business ownership, some challenges, maybe some best practices, and share a peek into what it's really like to build and operate a business as an entrepreneur. Now, if this is your first time on the channel, be sure to like and subscribe so you get notifications when we drop new conversations like this. So, Nick, thanks so much for being here today. So, tell our listeners a little bit about your background and about how you got into this business.
Yeah, so lots of different inroads, but my background was primarily in sports. And I like to tell people I ran my first professional sports event in the fourth grade. So before you laugh, it was legit. On the playground at recess, I had this massive four-square tournament where we had cardboard trophies and paper medals, and I had a bracket set up for all my friends. We had multiple squares, and I was charging people lunch money to participate. So from then on, all I dreamed about, and I didn't really realize the term at the time, was becoming a sports management major and going on to run a pro sports team or be an athletic director or something like that. So, where I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, we had the Columbus Crew, and my sport was always soccer. You can see behind me. And my dream was to play professional soccer as well. So, I actually started interning with the Columbus Crew, got to get on the practice field with some stars back in the day and feel like a big shot even though I wasn't that good. It was nice that they let me kind of kick around. And started learning about what it took to run teams behind the scenes. So in college, I actually went on and started interning with athletic departments. I started off at a small school in PA, went to Miami of Ohio, interned there, had a great mentor there that ran these internship programs and got students really involved at a young age and ended up graduating from Miami with a degree in sports management, went on to the University of Tennessee, where I did much the same thing, but also got a position as a graduate instructor, basically teaching college courses. So I had this dream then of getting in front of classrooms and being a professor, and came to U of L and started taking courses to actually do that, but also got into the business side and ended up transferring into the MBA program, finish up that degree, but did a lot of consulting with some sports programs about how to use social media the right way. And this was back in 2000, I guess, 6, when Facebook was really just kind of taking off, but I noticed no sports programs were using it to monetize. So there was a pro indoor soccer team here called the Louisville Lightning, and I walked into the door when they had no infrastructure. There was a young guy trying to be the general manager, and he was like, "Please help me." So I told him that I could build his website, build his social media, help them to get a following, and do a lot with a very small budget. Did all that, came back the next week, and I said, "All right, I've got the site all set up and I'm ready to put your staff on there." Start introducing me to the rest of the organization. He said, "Well, you're looking at it. I need help." So I went to U of L, brought in an entire front office of interns that were student workers that basically worked for free for the whole season. We had 30 people interning every season from there on out, and that became our front office staff. And I went from, just someone building a website to the vice president of operations to then the general manager. While I was doing that, I caught the attention of University of Louisville, and they actually hired me to be the first director of social media for a D1 athletic program in the whole country. And they brought me in not just to tweet and post on Facebook, but to figure out what's the ROI from everything that we were doing. And I started working with the partners there, like Yum Brands and Papa John's and Humana, and I formed some partnerships with Google and created ways that they could monetize everything. And I looked at the athletes as our stars and started thinking about NIL, or what's now called NIL, name, image, likeness, over a decade ago, and building sponsorship programs that incorporated the athletes and everything we had going on. So from all this advising, I built up enough that I could start freelancing. I actually got hired away to be a chief marketing officer for a local healthcare company, and they gave me a multi-million dollar budget to help them rebrand, redo their website, help with franchise growth and development, do their influencer marketing, TV, radio, everything. And eventually I got to the point where I was helping them grow so much, but I had all of this background in ways that other people didn't. And I kept getting hired or asked to work for these other companies, and finally formed my own organization called Shark Jockey. And the whole idea is we're like the sharks, because we never stop moving, but we also guide these sharks. We provide expertise so that they can navigate oceans of marketing questions. And that was kind of the catalyst for the start of everything I'm doing now.
Okay, awesome. So now you've built up a team of, I think you told me 16 team members, right?
Correct.
So obviously they're doing some of it. So as a CEO now, how do you spend your time? What's your current primary role in the business?
Yeah, so Shark Jockey kind of has four divisions, right? We've got the agency side, the Shark Jockey Digital, as I call it, that has traditional marketing and advertising services. We do a lot with building brands, building websites, creating social media campaigns, and helping to get people to get more awareness for their brand. I do a lot of e-commerce and retail. From that, I've been able to use my experience in sport to work with a lot of athletes. So even before NIL opened up the floodgates in college athletics, I would work with some professional athletes that were done with their playing days and trying to figure out how do they create personal brands for themselves. I also worked with some influencers in town and helped them to grow. So I've created a separate division now called Shark Jockey Pro that just helps athletes and influencers primarily to get their personal brands off the ground, to become influencers themselves, and hopefully to become the CEO of their own brands. And then through that process, I've had to work with a lot of people on what I call a Shark Jockey Launchpad, and that's for startups, businesses that aren't quite ready for the traditional services, that don't really have their products streamlined or figured out all the way yet. They might have personal brands, but they haven't put it into action. So the Launchpad helps them to get started. And then we have Shark Jockey Media, where I'm actually creating podcasts and what I call modern marketing, which most of us see on our phones now, where people are creating long form content and dividing that up into short clips that gets them a lot of views and engagement on the social media channels. So most of my day is spent talking to our partners, trying to create business and to help our partners succeed. And then as we get more and more tasks, I assign that back to our team. Like you said, there's about 16 people working on Shark Jockey programs every single day.
Okay. So if I was a listener out there that was a small, medium-sized business, how would I know whether or not that, yeah, I should reach out and talk to Nick?
So really, if you fit into one of those four categories, I like to say that I have a path forward to help you, right?
Mhm.
So if any of those things are problems, right now I begin almost all of my meetings by asking people, what is it that you want to accomplish between now and New Year's Eve? Imagine you're at that New Year's Eve party, you want to brag about what you've accomplished during the past year, and you also want to tell people what you're excited about for the year ahead. That's where I can fit in. So if you have an idea in mind and you just quite haven't gotten off the ground yet, or your business is larger, you already have revenue coming in, you already have products, but you'd like to improve on certain areas, that's where I can help with a couple of ideas to get your growth up to where you'd like it to be during the year ahead. And then if you'd like to reach out, then it's easy, just sharkjockey.com, like the animal and the horse rider.
Okay. So why did you end up choosing to go into business instead of just staying in that consulting
Well,
role?
I've heard for years people talk about being unemployable. And I
Mhm.
have a lot of experience. I used to think that I was a great employee, but I worked with a lot of people that had different views on leadership. The way that they went about things didn't align with my values, with my culture. Also, as I've grown up, it's been harder and harder for me to work 100 hours a week. I still work really hard, but I form my own hours. So I'll work on weekends, I'll work on nights, but now I organize that around my personal life and my family. I'm married, I have kids now, I have a dog who's on the floor squeaking while she's chewing on a toy next to me. And it's easier now for me to be able to set my own schedule, to choose who I want to work with and how I go about conducting business. Whereas before, rightfully so, I had to fall in line with someone else's vision and culture. And I tried to do a good job with that, but over the years, I've learned that there's certain businesses where it's just better to walk away from than to be forced into doing what they want.
Okay. So, as you look back, what was the transition from kind of employee to consultant to business owner like? Was it smooth? Was it interesting?
Well, it's interesting to me, but for myself, I've had, geez, over 100 different work experiences. Many of those were paid, some were internships, some were volunteers, some were full salary, six-figure jobs, and I had some really great positions along the way. But I never really thought of myself as being an entrepreneur and business owner, although I had tried to do that many times. I was kind of forced into this role just because I gained so many people that kept asking for help. I like to say that I was kind of trying to catch waves. Social media, as that was growing, I saw that coming and formed some expertise there. How can sports teams use social media? That translated to how can sponsors use social media? That translated to how can businesses use social media to monetize? And I had all these great experiences to show because I was dabbling in those areas, and that turned into showing that I could get an ROI for these things. So I was forced into starting a business because I didn't know what to do with that revenue. Then along the way, that grew more and more, and it got to a point where I could actually make that my full-time career. So I wasn't a great entrepreneur at first. I also taught in colleges along the way. I mentioned at UT and at University of Louisville. I taught undergraduate and graduate courses. I think it's very, very hard for college teachers then to become entrepreneurs because we talk a lot about these conceptual ideas and how things could work. And I used to spend hours at night reading textbooks to bring that knowledge back to the classroom. And I thought that I knew a lot, but I didn't have that hands-on experience. And I only gained that over the last really decade of just trial and error and having to make things work because if my clients left me, I couldn't put food on the table. So desperation will make you learn very, very quickly. And I've been forced into a position now where I know exactly what to do. I know how to help people see ROI very, very quickly. And that's tough. And I've had to productize and be able to move from just these conceptual ideas to saying, all right, here's the 3 steps. Here's how long it'll take. Here's what you're going to pay for it. And then here's how I provide accountability and deliverables so you can see if that's working or not.
Right. So, what's a memorable roadblock or hurdle that you were challenged with that you had to overcome to get to where you wanted to go?
Well, there's been a lot of them. For me, I've had to learn every step inside of my business. So I tell people now that I was kind of born inside the matrix, right? I actually created my first websites back in 1999, and they were terrible, but everyone's were back then. So I learned how to do a little bit of coding and some basic things on websites, but really I put away that part of my life for a decade or so while I was doing all of this other work in sports and management and leadership, but I've been forced to go back into it. And so I had to reteach myself, coding. I had to learn from the developers that I was working with. I had to, develop my expertise in certain systems. So now I can build websites on WordPress and Shopify and go high level. And I can, speak PHP and Laravel. And I've actually managed teams of developers all across the country and even in other parts of the world. I've had to teach myself again and again how the social media algorithms work because they change every 6 months. And what I do for influencers to earn money one month could change within a matter of days or weeks. So I constantly have to teach myself, and I watch tons and tons of podcasts on the weekends or as I'm traveling, as I'm changing diapers and playing with my kids. I'm always trying to learn what's the next trend, what's the next thing that I can grab onto because I want to catch that new wave and present it to my clients. So, one of the big things for me is always trying to find what's next that I could be pitching. So I've been able to build up a great list of clients that come to me for some of these traditional services. But if I can't provide them the next big thing, they'll start looking elsewhere. They'll jump with another agency owner. So it's important for me to be able to be on the cusp of technology and say, here's what we're going to try next.
What's it like to be out on the leading edge of, like example, NIL? You were doing NIL before NIL kind of came into the public consciousness. So what's it like, being out ahead of technology, being ahead of the use of technology and concepts like NIL? What's that like, in terms of running a business that's just 6 months, a year, 2 years ahead of the rest of the world?
Well, it's a good feeling when it works. It's a bad feeling when you're too early, right? And with NIL, I was one of the first people in the country to do deals with athletes for certain corporations, right? So some of the clients that I was working with, they were working with college athletes and they were trying to pave the way, so to speak. The challenge was a lot of the athletes, they didn't understand how to be influencers. So many of these early deals, there was no ROI. It was just kind of the new trend, right? And people wanted to try it, and there's a lot of companies that wasted thousands, even millions of dollars trying to do these NIL deals early on. I like to say athletes aren't influencers without education. right? And that's where my roots as a college instructor really, really helps because I've seen athletes again and again take these deals one time, but then the businesses won't come back. They don't want to work with them again because they didn't see that ROI. And honestly, most of the college athletes I talk to, they don't know what ROI is. I've worked with athletes that don't understand that they have to pay taxes when they get money. I've worked with athletes that I go to give them a check, they don't have a bank account, and they literally ask me, "What do I do with this?" Right? So it was almost too soon. Now, what I've seen just in a short amount of time is I have middle school and high school athletes that come to work with me, right? And it's not always the athletes, but it's the parents, right? It's that those parents that are investing in their kids, that want to help their kids, that want the best for them, but they have no idea what they need to be doing in terms of setting the framework for their kids to succeed in this new layer of life, right? So now I want to try to help athletes at a younger age, just like we do in school. Right. I feel like we train these 18 years through elementary, middle, high school, college so that kids can get great jobs. But now, once they're thrust into college with NIL, it's almost too late as freshmen and sophomores to figure it all out because everything's being thrown at them so fast, and being a college athlete is a full-time job.
Right.
So it's been a lot of fun being on the front end of this, but there's been so many challenges, and a lot of the agencies that I saw that started early in NIL, they dissolved, they went away, they branched out into other subjects, and they're not around anymore because they couldn't figure that out, that they were just too soon to the party. And now it's really, really exploding.
Yeah. So where do you see the business 3 to 5 years from now?
In a couple different lanes, right? So with the agency side, we have a great core of clients that we're working with on, that traditional lane of helping them with their brands, setting up their marketing that leads into advertising and providing them the data and the analysis so that they can continue to scale and grow. We've literally helped some clients move from, a couple $100,000 a year in revenue up to tens of millions of dollars and looking at IPOs, and even a few clients I've worked with have scaled into the billion-dollar range, right? So that's been a lot of fun, but I'm really trying to grow my work with athletes because that's rewarding. That's
Mhm.
something where, changing young people's lives and helping not just the athletes, but also the parents. Now that I'm a dad, it's great for me to be able to tell parents that this is a program that I created, not just to earn money, but to help their kids. And even
Mhm.
if I never earn a dollar from it, it's still worthwhile because these are the steps that I would use with my children. Right. So the iteration of me creating Shark Jockey Pro was I was driving back with my first daughter in the car and my wife next to me. And I was like, how can I help her avoid a lot of the challenges that I faced as a young athlete? Where literally it was my dream to play college soccer, but I was working 5 jobs at the time. The athletic department called me and offered me a little bit more money for the next year, but it wasn't enough. I was playing out of state. I had to make a choice between, playing and committing myself to academics and, what what I hoped would lead to a bigger and better job down the road. And it was a really tough and sad decision for me, but money was at the root of it because I wasn't earning enough to continue to, supplement what they were offering. So
Mhm.
now with NIL, athletes don't have to make that decision as long as they're set up the right way. So this program that I created was for my kids. It's what I do as a dad. And now when I work with other dads and other moms, they're like, this is amazing. I'm able to connect with my kid in ways that I haven't been able to in years. I'm talking to them about what they're doing on social media. I'm talking to them about building a business and what their future is and, what they want to do after high school and college. And this is exactly what I was looking for. So that's something that, both trajectories are rewarding for me because I like helping business owners too. But with where I'm at in life, I really want to grow that more and more, especially because my kids are so young. I want to be able to have this program for them and say, look, I'm utilizing this. It's working for us. This is the path forward because it's helping my family and I know it can help yours too.
Okay, awesome. So kind of last business question here. Earlier, when you're talking about kind of the journey from employee to entrepreneur, you mentioned, leadership styles that weren't a good fit for you and management styles, culture. So tell me a little bit about your leadership style, your management and the culture you're building that is working for you and your team and as a result, your clients.
Yeah, so transformational leadership, I think, is what a lot of people aspire to do and implement in their business. They say, we are here, we're trying to get here. How does that happen? Right. And I've had to start this from scratch as a startup. So I try to do a good job setting a vision with my team. Every quarter we I like to say have a planning session. We like to, lay out what's ahead. For me, I've had to diversify into these other buckets, and I mentioned those four components. So for me, I'm trying to transform all of my businesses and say we are in startup mode still, but how do we make sure that our projects actually turn into ROI for ourselves too? So it takes a lot of coaching from my end to work with our team and, to lay out their vision. And a lot of times I start by just working with people that are freelancers, contractors, people that I can get to know first and make sure that they do a good job and then figure out how I can implement them back into full-time roles on our team. A lot of the people that I work with here and locally in Louisville are people that I've worked with at other jobs or with other agencies in the past, and they're a lot like me, where they got expertise from the jobs that they'd done, but now I'm able to bring them back into Shark Jockey and use them on a part-time or full-time or project basis with our team. So I'm trying to be a good leader, practice what I preach, make sure that I'm setting that vision for our team, whether they're working with me full-time or part-time or on simple projects, because everyone that I've met in the past could be a great asset for something that I'm doing in the future.
All right, excellent. So tell me about training your team. What's your philosophy on, building your team's skill set?
So I would like to do a lot more with this, that's for sure. It's not like I'm in a position where I can send people to the best conferences across the country or anything like that. But, for my core team, I've been able to grow this. And with most agencies that I was a part of, it was a roller coaster, right? Where, especially the agencies where I worked with some of them for the longest, they got into this habit of living and dying with the clients that they had. So they
Right.
would have some great clients. They would commit to, an awesome first project. We'd hire 10 people. And then for whatever reason, that project would end and we'd have to fire eight of them, right? You hire the next five, you fire three. You hire the next five, you fire sometimes 10 or more, and the agency implodes. With Shark Jockey, I haven't had to fire anyone, which has been great. Now, I've had a few people that have had to step away for life or personal reasons or families or whatever it is, other opportunities, but we've been able to grow over the years rather than this constant roller coaster and contracting. So along the way, I've tried to keep to a couple of simple things. Like I said, always setting the vision for the future and trying to bring on people that have the ability to grow. So I bring on people for very succinct, specific roles. Maybe it's to manage social media, manage ads, help with design, but I try to find people that have leadership capabilities. And then as they grow, if I have a couple people in the same position, I'll bring in the next batch under them, right? So that person is elevated to a supervisor kind of role, and then they're training the next people with the things that I help them to be able to do. So
Okay.
many people on my team are in other countries as well. A lot of agencies outsource work. So I've got certain teams that might be in the Philippines or in India, and they do amazing work. They're college educated. They're just as professional as people that I've worked with in the US, sometimes even more so. But they're like me, they're working with clients all over the world. And sometimes there's a language barrier there too. So
Mhm.
this pattern has helped me because they're able to take what I've helped them with over the years and translate it back to their team. And sometimes I bring in people who, well, a lot of times English isn't their first language, but they're supervisors, those people that I've educated, they're able to be leaders with their own teams. So I've got people that I've actually hired, and I don't consider their contractors or employees part of Shark Jockey, but now they'll have 3, 5, 10 people working under them as well. So that's been
Oh,
really nice to see because I'm helping to power other businesses in other places as well.
okay, awesome. Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground here in a short amount of time. For those watching, I encourage you to, save this, watch it a few times, and make sure you pick up on all the nuggets. So as we start to wrap up, Nick, a couple of just quick questions, top of the head answers probably best. So what is your key to success?
So a couple things that I've been fortunate to do, and I mentioned one of them multiple times, is just catch the wave, right? So for whatever reason, I was able to get on social media early on and connect the dots between, all right, social media and Facebook profiles are fun and I'm able to connect with friends, but how would businesses and athletic teams and sports teams use this? And I was able to do that early on to the point where I got a really awesome position because I just jumped in for free and started doing it. I started consulting. I became an intern for many places. I walked into a door and said, "Hey, I just want to help, and you don't even have to pay me." And that led to these amazing positions. And, along the way, I also did other things I didn't mention, but I was one of the first people in Louisville to flying drones around and take pictures and do videos. I was one of the first people to wear Google glasses and tie that into athletic departments. And, then I was able to be one of the first people to figure out how athletes can create effective brands and use that to gain more opportunities through NIL. I've worked with a lot of influencers and, literally managed over 100 influencers a month. And that's been really helpful to a lot of the businesses that I worked with. But I always try to see what's ahead and what's coming and figure out not just can I do it, but how do I productize that? And then the other key piece for me as a business owner is I've learned more and more how to give away my best stuff. So all of this expertise and knowledge, I try to productize, but when people come to me and say that they need help with a strategy or they don't know what to do with NIL or they need steps for building a personal brand, oftentimes I advise them for free or very, very little amounts. And then I say, now that you've got that, how are you going to fulfill it? How are you going to make sure that this becomes part of your business? And I offer those products through the agency side. So I might build programs for partners for free or for very little money, and then I'm able to help fulfill and deliver on what they need in order to scale that business.
Awesome. So what's one piece of advice you would give other business owners?
So it depends on what their business is. For most business owners right now, I tell them to build their personal brand. And
Okay.
that's not for everyone. I know a lot of people are scared to get in front of a camera. They are very humble. They don't like talking about themselves. But this is something that it's not just me saying it. But again and again, I find if you have a stronger personal brand, that's going to present a lot more valuable opportunities. For one thing, it's easier on social media to gain a following if you have a personal brand. There's been a lot of studies now that find it's not just business owners, but it's people in positions like doctors,
Right.
lawyers, architects. Your clients are more likely to work with you and pay you money if they can see that you have a personal brand and that you're a real person and that they know where you live and what you do and what your culture and values are. It's easier for clients to work with you. So that's the main thing that I harp on now because it's so easy. But most people that I talk to, they spend years building their business and forget that they are a brand in it of themselves and they need to develop that.
Awesome. What's a book you're reading or listening to or a podcast that you would recommend to other business owners?
That's a fun question because the main thing that comes to mind, it is business related, but there's a lot of religion tied into it. And
Mhm.
I try to be careful about talking about my religious beliefs. I've, become more firm in my beliefs over the years. It's not something that I talked about as a young person. I grew up Lutheran, right? Christian. And, in college, in even early professional life, that's not something that you really talk about all the time, or at least not in the circles that I was in. But I've come back to that again and again. And there's a guy named Myron Golden, and he's got a really big podcast. And I've never met him, but I've basically just tried to consume all that I can from him. And he's got a lot of books, but his podcast is amazing to me because it's adapting biblical principles for business, life, and wealth and entrepreneurship. So almost every day he's got new content. He's been doing things on YouTube for at least a decade, if not more. And I love following a lot of what he does because it aligns not just with me as a business owner, but with what my values are and a lot of my belief system that I'm trying to reacclimate with and hold true to. So, and aside from that, I've got a lot of great books on my shelf that I'll go back and grab and look at. Some of those have been really, really helpful for me over the years. But, one of the ones that I was kind of a nerd growing up that everybody points to, but How to Win Friends and Influence People has been invaluable for me. And this is one of the first books that I was reading on the library stacks back in high school.
Okay. Thank you. Those are two great suggestions. So if people want to find out more, connect with you, what's the best way to get a hold of Nick Stover to pick your brain and see, if you're a good fit?
Yep. So the two main websites, sharkjockey.com, like the animal and the horse rider, That's the agency side with all the traditional services for business owners, entrepreneurs. And then sharkjockeypro.com is where I like to point the athletes, the influencers. We have some musicians and entertainers. And that's where I really help a lot of people with their personal brands and get the expertise, the knowledge, and the steps to go from zero to hero in a short amount of time. So both of those websites have forms there to find me and reach out for more.
Okay, awesome. All right, last question of the day. So what inspires you the most right now?
Oh, that's easy. My kids. So I've got a almost 5-year-old and a 3-year-old daughter, and that's been the most life-changing experience. And I say my kids, but without my wife, it definitely wouldn't have been possible. And she puts up with me in ways that no one else could. But just having the ability to be a good husband, be a father, learn from my kids, and figure out how I need to improve because they reflect us as parents, right? I see a lot of myself in them, and if I'm having a bad day, they reflect that. If I'm having a good day and I'm happy, they reflect that. So it's motivating to me because if I'm not a positive influence on them, then I see that right away. So I'm trying to be my best to do my best to be a better dad. And by doing that, I think it's making me a better person. Now, when I go on to meetings, kind of have that same mentality. And, kids reflect it so quickly. They're little mirrors, but so do my clients. So do the people that I talk to. So if I go on to meetings and I'm not happy and I'm not positive and I'm not trying to motivate people to learn the next thing, to take the next step, then I see that really quickly and clients don't want to work with me.
Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. That's great. So, listeners, this has been Nick Stover, who is the founder CEO of Shark Jockey and also Shark Jockey Pro. Don't forget about that, two different sides of his business. And he has shared a ton of interesting, great information with us today. Lots of little tips in there. If you want to know more about social media and ROI in social media, Nick's your guy. So reach out and talk to him. As he mentioned, he's happy to just talk with you and give you some advice if you're willing to listen and actually implement advice. So, Nick, thank you so much for being with you today. It's been great chatting with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. I look forward to hearing from you again in the future.
All right. So, this is Business Spotlight Series with Nick Stover. And make sure you go ahead and like and subscribe so you see the next conversation when it drops. Thank you and have a great day. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.